Be featured on ILTV and show the world what you have to offer. We broadcast from Israel to around the globe, so get yourself camera ready.
Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel and Hamas reportedly inch closer to a prisoner swap agreement. Meantime, the government encroaching further and further upon the status quos of religious life in Israel. And finally, Ben & Jerry's Shmerry's, an Israeli knockoff now looking to replace the boycott-supporting ice cream brand in Israeli grocery store freezers. We begin tonight with a major development. Gaza-based Palestinian terror group Hamas reportedly offering a prisoner swap agreement to Israel. It's the first reportedly serious offer made by Hamas in years. And if the two-phase deal is agreed to in its current form, Hamas would first release Israeli civilians Avraham Mengistu and Hisham al-Sayed, and then later the bodies of Israeli soldiers Oron Shaul and Hadar Golden. The problem, as always, is the price. Here to discuss is Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, Dr. Eran Lerman. Dr. Lerman, thank you so much for being with us. Now, under the terms of Hamas's proposal, Israel would have to release all of its female Palestinian prisoners, plus 800 prisoners led by Marwan Barghouti, who's serving multiple life sentences for terror-related charges, and then some 300 terrorist bodies. How does this compare to the swap deal for Gilad Shalit in 2011?
Well, first of all, this is the offer. I'm not under the impression that Israel would accept it as such. This is the beginning of a negotiation. It is an indication that Hamas understands that this issue must be resolved if there is to be any move forward towards reconstruction in Gaza. They thought at the end of the fighting in May that they were in a position to dictate. This is not the case. Now, I don't believe that we are going to release people with blood on their hands, and I don't believe we are going to interfere in the internal dynamics in West Bank politics, which is what the release of Barghouti would imply. As to female prisoners and the exchange of bodies, etc., that's certainly within the realm of possibility. I think when it comes to people who may in the future constitute an active threat, the less I believe, and I hope and I believe that the lessons of the Shalit deal have been learned. People have paid with their lives for the Shalit deal in terms of the release of people who went back into murderous activity. This must not happen again. People can be released into Gaza where they are ineffectual, and people may be released who are no longer an active threat. But I believe the lessons have been learned, and there's clearly, in any case, a different proposition here when it comes to the release of bodies as distinct from the release of a captive soldier. As for the two civilians held, this is clearly an act of piracy of the worst kind. These are two people with apparently limited understanding of the consequences of their actions who are being held by Hamas for years. The sooner this is resolved, the better for the people of Gaza, because this is the key to the door for future reconstruction.
All right, so again, you mentioned Marwan Barghouti. He's a popular Palestinian political icon, and he has disagreements with President Abbas's Fatah party. But at the end of the day, Barghouti is himself still a member to that Fatah party. Could you expand on why Hamas is so keen to release him specifically?
Well, because he's probably the best known name. Should they be able to achieve his release, they would establish that they are the masters of the political game in the Palestinian context. This is a pretty, I would say, obvious ploy to position themselves as key players in the power game that may soon ensue over the legacy of Abu Mazen, of Mahmoud Abbas, who's well into his 80s, into the 13th or 14th year of a 4-year presidential term. So at the end of the day, Hamas is now seeking to establish their predominance in the game. I don't think it's a good idea for Israel to let them do it.
All right. Dr. Eran Lerman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And let's hope for good news.
In other news, ultra-Orthodox or Haredi lawmakers are up in arms this week. The Knesset is advancing a number of supposed challenges to rabbinical authority in Israel. First, the Knesset is passing a bill through the first of 3 readings after accidentally killing the bill 2 weeks ago. Knesset Speaker Miki Levy hitting the wrong button on the final vote, sending it back through the system. But anyway, if adopted, the bill would reform rabbinical judge appointments by expanding the appointments panel to include more government representatives and women. Backers say the bill would boost the standing of the rabbinical courts, while critics call it a shameful precedent and a war against Judaism and religion meant only to secure jobs for coalition officials. Meanwhile, Religious Affairs Minister Matan Kahana advancing his new kosher certification plan, which would allow private kosher agencies to provide services and ensure kosher standards under a rabbinate monitoring body. But rabbinate officials and Haredi lawmakers are again railing against it, calling Kahana, quote, Antiochus in Knesset, the villain from the Hanukkah holiday story. And this, as Kahana's plan, would potentially allow for lower-level kashrut certifications. Then finally, the latest challenge coming again from Finance Minister Avigdor Lieberman, who already has taken shots at the ultra-Orthodox with plans to increase Haredi military conscription and cut child care subsidies for those without 2 working parents. Now, Lieberman is looking for ways to encourage, if not force, more Haredi men into the workforce. But Haredi party leaders, as well as Haredi workforce advocates, are fighting back against this measure, saying that it could actually backfire, as most Haredi men lack the proper training for competitive wage jobs. Further, the emphasis on employing men could force Haredi women out of the market. So are the recent challenges to the ultra-Orthodox status quo a long time coming, or is the government coalition truly overstepping? Joining me with more, Rabbi Dov Lipman, former Yesh Atid Party Knesset member and co-creator of both the Yad Le'olim and Avodot Lecharedim organizations. Rabbi, thank you so much for being with us. Now, again, in general, the complaints against the recent bills in Knesset have all had a similar thread. They reject the government's apparent interference in religious life. Do you think that the coalition is overstepping its bounds?
I think the coalition has to be very careful about how it goes about making these changes. You pointed out in your introduction that there are times when the government might think that it's actually making progress on a certain issue, but it's actually pushing the Haredi community away from that progress. Involved with, where we're helping ultra-Orthodox get training, get jobs in the tens of thousands. When they see the government cutting back on subsidies, when they see the government interrupting the way of life of the Haredim with all kinds of decisions, it actually pushes them away from joining the workforce sometimes. So I advise an approach which is much more, I'm talking about now on the workforce issue, working together with the Haredi community instead of making what they view as decrees against their community, which actually raises the voices of the more extreme side of the Haredi community instead of the moderate side. Having said that, I do believe there is place for significant reforms in the rabbinate related to kashrut and other issues where broader Israel can be served. And it's time for the ultra-Orthodox side to be more open towards those possibilities. And that's news, good news for broader Israel that this government is bringing to the table.
All right, so I want to actually move on now to the rabbinical judge appointments. You mentioned kashrut and the workforce. We're going to come back to those issues in just a moment. But with respect to rabbinical judge appointments, the proposal that's on the Knesset floor right now is being to expand the panel that makes appointments to include government officials and more women. What do you make of the criticism that this will hurt Israel's Jewish character and is only meant to secure more jobs for coalition members?
The truth is, I see it as a positive development. I think that there's been a very closed group that's been deciding on who the rabbinic judges are, and that has really influenced the nature of who those rabbis are. We have to remember, there's a wide range, even within religious, Orthodox Judaism, of perspectives, and I think it's best for Israel for all of those voices to come to the table. So I actually think it's a positive development to open up those doors a little bit, and I think that, again, the ultra-Orthodox side is very much viewing it as themselves and protecting the way things have been according to their understanding and their community. But there's a broader Jewish people in Israel, and that has to be taken into account. That is what I believe the coalition is trying to do in this case. And therefore, terminologies that are thrown out there of Antiochus and all kinds of other rhetoric, it's really not the place. That's really politics, by the way. A lot of these people do talk to each other very kindly and nicely behind the scenes. And I think that it is time for progress on that front where every person in Israel can feel they have a representative who's at the table when making these very important appointments for people who will make decisions that have real impact on their lives, especially in critical life cycle events.
All right, Rabbi Dov Lipman, thank you so much again, as always, for your insights.
Thank you, Aaron.
And if you'd like to see my full interview with Rabbi Dov Lipman on Haredim in the workforce, please check it out at ILTV's YouTube page or on our Facebook and ILTV.tv channels. Now, moving on to our daily coronavirus update. Cases are still rising at alarming rates. The U.S., therefore, revising its travel board, characterizing Israel as a level 3 threat. Israel, however, seemingly still in a frustrating state of confusion regarding its pandemic policy. Once the pinnacle of health during the pandemic, Israel is now returning to a coronavirus infection rate of 2.32% and rising. Over 2,123 people confirmed infected overnight, and at least 121 Israelis now in serious condition. Yet authorities appearing indecisive on how to best respond, starting with how to reopen schools. The new school year set to begin in September, and Education Minister Yifat Shasha-Biton looking to open classrooms as normal. Additionally, she wants to shorten exposure-borne quarantines for students and teachers to just 2 days with a negative COVID test. Shasha-Biton receiving backlash, however, Health Ministry Director General Professor Nachman Ash saying that a new outline is already in the works, including a pilot for shorter quarantines for kids. But Ash is adding that the Health Ministry does not agree to 48-hour quarantines, as, quote, a negative test and an immediate return to school will only serve to spread the pathogen, end quote. Meanwhile, Ben Gurion Airport also taking a step towards the increasingly restrictive. The airport now banning people who do not hold a plane ticket, i.e. chaperones or family, from even entering its passenger terminals. As for vaccinations, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett praising the public's recent cooperation in getting their immunizations. But he and other COVID cabinet leaders are also still in talks towards administering a third booster shot to at-risk Israelis in the coming weeks. This despite FDA approval still pending, and health experts warning that more data is needed to examine the benefits.
זו החלטה מאוד מורכבת. אז מה עומד על המאזניים, לכאן ולכאן? מצד אחד, אנחנו רוצים לראות שזה בטוח וזה יעיל, ולהסתמך על הנתונים שלנו שבאמת מראים אם יש דעיכה בחיסון או לא. אם יש התוויה לתת את זה מהבחינה הזאת. מהצד השני יש לנו את ההתפרצות, ואנחנו רוצים לעצור את ההתפרצות הזאת. אני מעריך שבאופן גס הנתונים האלה נכונים. יכול להיות שזה קצת יותר, יכול להיות שזה קצת פחות. אנחנו מסתכלים על חתכים של אוכלוסיות, מבוגרים, יותר צעירים, אבל הסימנים לפחות אצלנו שיש דעיכה של החיסון, אנחנו נקווה שבימים הקרובים נדייק את החקירה הזאת ונוכל לבוא עם משהו יותר מדויק.
And now it's time for our daily update on the 2020-2021 Summer Olympic Games, where we give you the latest hits, misses, controversies, and more surrounding Israel's Olympic team in Tokyo, Japan. And of course, back presenting all the details, we have ILTV's Chana Rifkin. Chana, thanks for being with us. What do we have first today?
So first, this morning, Israel welcomed home our newest Olympic hero, Taekwondo medalist Avishag Semberg. Let's take a look.
זה בכלל לא שאלה, הראש שלי לגמרי בטקוונדו, אני רוצה להיות אלופה אולימפית, כמובן שאני לא מתיימרת להגיד זה יקרה בפריז, אני אעשה הכל כדי שזה יקרה. הראש שלי גם להיות אלופת עולם ועוד פעם אלופת אירופה, אני רוצה לשחזר את ההישג גם מאליפות אירופה, אז כמובן שעכשיו זה קצת זמן מנוחה, כי זה באמת חלום שמתגשם, אבל הראש שלי זה להיות אלופה אולימפית, כאילו זה הישג, אבל ההישג עוד לפניי.
Such a heartwarming welcome with the champagne and everything.
she's young but committed and focused. Just listening to her, she knows what she wants, and she'll get there, no doubt.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. It looked like you could think that they were hazing her, but no. All right, let's move on now to some competition updates. Fill us in on what's happened since yesterday.
Right, so today, Israel's men's swim team broke a 2019 record in time in the men's relay, setting the record at 7 minutes, 8 seconds, and 65 milliseconds. That's about 3.5 seconds of an improvement. Then yesterday, there was so much hope for Israel's Anastasia Gorbenko after she qualified for the 100-meter and the 200-meter medleys, even breaking a record, but unfortunately, she didn't make the cut. Coming in 5th in the 200-meter medley semifinals, but in the 10th overall in the competition. And then she finished 8th in the 100-meter semifinals. But I just want to say, it's still a great feat for a swimmer as young as she is. She made history for Israel as the first female swimmer to make it this far. And she even said it herself, she will do better next time.
Yeah, of course. Always look to the future. And then, of course, we had another loss, I understand, with gold medal hopeful Sagi Muki in judo.
So Sagi Muki, will cut to the chase. He was Israel's predicted chance for a gold, but sadly, he didn't make it past the final 16. We knew coming into the Olympics that he's still recovering from a bad injury, so it's a disappointment, of course. But, of course, had he not been injured to begin with, who knows? I mean, Israel's Sport 5 News interviewed him after the loss, and he went on to explain that, yes, it's devastating, and he didn't want it to end like this, but he did give it his all.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, he was injured. I think he slipped 2 discs. I mean, he was in bad shape. The fact that he still made it back through his training back to the Olympics is amazing. Chana, what's coming up next, actually?
Yeah, so super exciting. Tomorrow we're coming back with Peter Kurtz. He's the general manager for Israel's Olympic baseball team. He's going to give us an inside look on what's going on with the team, his projections and hopes for this coming Thursday's game, and more. So yeah, we have a lot to look forward to. Still for the rest of the week as well, basketball, judo updates, maybe some windsurfing updates. So more on today's competitions. So we'll have a lot more tomorrow too.
All right, I'm excited. Chana, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, speaking of BDS, the Olympic Committee is not the only ones taking action against anti-Israel boycotters this week. Israeli NGO Shurat Adin now seizing Ben & Jerry's West Bank trademark with threats to sell a knockoff of their whole line of flavors and more, and all in efforts to undermine the ice cream company's BDS-based protest. But with us to explain how this is being done is attorney and Shurat Adin founder Nitzana Darshan-Leitner. Nitzana, thanks so much for being here. How are you taking Ben & Jerry's trademark?
Look, Ben & Jerry's announced that they are no longer intend to work in Judea and Samaria to sell products or to produce them. They basically gave up their right for the trademark in this area. Have to remember that a trademark is something territorial. It's based on region. You can't register your trademark all over the world. You have to register it only in places that you have full intention, sincere intention to work at. When they announced that they no longer intend to sell ice cream in Judea and Samaria, they abandoned their trademark in this region. Now it's free for all. And we in Shurat Adin came and seized it. Ben & Jerry will no longer own the trademark Ben & Jerry in Judea and Samaria.
So what kind of pushback are you suspecting will come back from this from Ben & Jerry's? Are you expecting a huge lawsuit?
Look, I don't think that Unilever will agree to give up its right for a trademark. Trademark is something very precious to a company. It's not easy to gain it. It's not easy to protect it or to register it from the beginning. But yet you have to prove that you're using it in a bona fide way, in a good faith way. They will have to come and defend it. And I want to hear their allegation. I want to hear what they want to say. I want to explain. If they come and say we, don't want to work in occupied territories anymore, as Ben & Jerry's said when they announced that they no longer be working in Judea and Samaria, how come they continue to work and to sell ice cream in other occupied territories in the world, like Northern Cyprus? like Western Sahara, like Tibet. Let them come, let them explain, let them tell us that it's not a real anti-Semitic decision, that it's really based on ideology that they have.
All right, so aside from ideally proving a point, or it sounds like proving a point, aside from that, are you partnering with Ben & Jerry's Israel franchisee Avi Zinger, whose contract has been canceled but is still working for the next year?
So I'll tell you, I'm waiting for Zinger to contact me because right now we are approached by a lot of ISO companies that want to get rights under Ben & Jerry's name. And perhaps that will be a step that we collectively will take. Right now, the process is we register in the company. It's called Judea and Samaria Ben & Jerry's. We are dealing with the Justice Ministry in Israel, which is the Corporation Registration Authority. And once we settle that and we settle the trademark issue, we will start doing deals with ice cream companies. Rather than it's not changing its mission, we will not start selling companies, but the company, the new corporation, will, along with ice cream manufacturers.
Wow. All right. So this is a very, very interesting story. I'm excited to see how this plays out. Yeah. Yeah, please.
Look, the goal, I know it's nice. I know it sounds very cute and a good idea, but what stands behind it is actually the way to fight BDS. All those boycotters that want to boycott Israel or want to boycott parts of Israel, this is the answer. We'll come and say, you no longer want to sell your products here, or you don't want to work here. Give it to us. We will take over. We will take your rights, we will take your trademark, we will seize any on your name, and we will work. You don't have to be here anymore, and we'll ride on your reputation. This is the answer to BDS.
All right, Nitzana Darshan-Leitner from the Shurat Adin Law Center. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us all about this story.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, now our final story tonight. An adorable red-haired newborn welcomed into the world earlier this month. A rare Sumatran orangutan born to 12-year-old mother Tana and 11-year-old father Rachamim at the Ramat Gan Safari Zoo. And this is the first orangutan to be born at the zoo in over a decade.
Delivered a baby girl, which still doesn't have a name. If you think of a name starting with the letter T, please let us know. We were very happy for this little girl. She is a very important addition to the breeding program, the European breeding program of orangutans, so that we can help and save this species from extinction in the nature.
Meanwhile, adding to the excitement, the fact that we can even see the baby at all. Tana hiding the baby ape under her fur with tight hugs, even from safari workers. And only recently, after weeks of working up the confidence, has Tana provided some space to see her daughter. Of course, not too much space just yet.
It's still very difficult to see the little girl because mom is holding her, or she's holding mom very tightly. And she's tiny, and all the ginger fur is very disguising. So it would be nicer to see her maybe in a month when she's a little bit bigger and start to roam around and search for interesting things around.
All right, and now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Well, Monday night lows in the 20s, ranging from 21 to 27 degrees Celsius. And then Tuesday's hottest temperatures are expected to be in the mid-30s throughout most of Israel, though a bit cooler in Haifa at 29 degrees and of course in Eilat at 41 degrees. Meteorologists predicting clear and sunny skies for the most part, with some partly cloudy skies in Beersheba. Now, back to the studio with Aaron.
All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.26 shekels to the American dollar and 2.59 shekels to the Canadian dollar. Finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, Follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.